In this tutorial I'm going to be showing you how to set your bass and sub levels when getting your mix ready for mastering and through the mastering stage as well. First of all, what I like to do, I limit each of my individual buses separately, or at least majority of them. So this is my bass bus. So as you can see there, it is being limited quite harshly. All that red area is how much gain reduction is being done. And you can see from the output it's pretty flat, it's pretty squashed, so it's going to be very loud. Now what I do, by this point obviously I've also done a similar thing with my drums. Not as much going on there, but it's getting the transients of the kick and the snare and bringing them down, and obviously through that pushing up the whole level, making the drums louder. So then I go through, and this has already been done a bit. This is my master bus. You can see obviously there's some compression, some EQ, but the main thing I'm going to be looking at here is the limiter. And I've already gone through to get this level, so the good way of doing this first is listen to your mix as a whole and increase the threshold, but increase the threshold but hold alt at the same time. So the more you increase the threshold, the more you decrease the output, which will keep the overall volume at a pretty consistent level. So you can see more clearly, it'll become more obvious when things start distorting if you're pushing them too hard. So I've gone through and I've listened to the whole mix and limited it as much as I feel is safe. And when I feel like I've reached a fairly comfortable level when nothing is distorting too much, I'll go through and I'll check my bass bus, which is obviously, as I showed before, already being limited. So as you can see there, it's got a pretty flat output, but the thing to make sure is here I've increased it by 11.31 dBs, turned on the output by 11.31, and then the second limiter re-increased it by 11.31, so I see the overall. So then I'm re-bringing up the level as much as I'm taking it down here to get the output as close to 0 dB as possible, but then decreasing it just by 0.02 just to make sure there are no peaks at anything at all that will be above 0 dB, because obviously as soon as you do that, you're clipping and then you're getting a distorted signal. So as you can see here, the bass, which is going through this limiter first and then this limiter second, this limiter doesn't really do anything apart from just bringing up what we took down here in this first limiter, but it's a good way of seeing what level your bass is at. So you can see the bass signal there, which has been obviously through the limiter on the bass bus, and then this limiter is not actually touching the threshold of the limiter at all. It's lying just below it, just a couple of dB below. Obviously you can push your bass, you can have no limiter on the bass bus and push your bass into the master limiter, but I just feel this is a lot cleaner way of doing this, because then you know exactly what level your bass is sitting at, and it means it's not hitting the limiter, and then you can have your drums do. And obviously they're hitting the limiter pretty strongly there again, so they are being re-limited, but that's again getting the peaks and pushing the drums as much as possible with the bass line just below. If you look at the sub is got no limiting on, because as soon as you limit a sub, it just becomes this horribly distorted sound. It basically turns into a square wave, which is not something you want. See, second is hitting the limiter, Just creating all horrible harmonics. I'll show you in the analyzer. So that's a pure sine wave. Actually, I might have a little bit of squaring, but it's clean anyway. As soon as you start pushing into limiter, you create all these horrible harmonics, which you don't want. So I don't limit my subs ever. So take that off. But then the way I set the sub level is the same way that I would set my bass level. Checking here to make sure it's lying just below the threshold, and it's not actually being pushed into limiter at all. And now what you usually want to do if you're making bass music, obviously this varies. With this sort of track, this sort of heavy track, you want your subs to be as loud as possible. In other genres, these rules will differ. But for something like drum and bass or dubstep or anything like that, you want your subs to be sitting, you want the peak of your sub to be sitting after mastering, after the final limiter, to be sitting somewhere between -4 and -6 dB, which this is. And when it's hitting around there, you know you've got your sub at a good level, and it'll sound good on any system, in clubs and that. Before I learned this, I often have my subs well too loud, and I wouldn't know through not putting it, but as soon as it was played on a sub, it would just sound super hot, heavy and dominating, and the rest of the track would be completely lost to it. So yeah, so if you do that with your basses and your subs, and then rerun your drums through the same limiter, you should get a pretty good overall level. So I'll just play you, I'll play you my subs, my bass, and my drums, just to show you what's going on again. Yeah, so that's getting, I mean, as you can see, lots of limiting going on. Flat output, I mean, it's difficult. The whole loudness war thing still kind of exists in drum and bass, so there's not really a way about that. If you want your track to go off in clubs, you still need it to be really loud. And wish it wasn't like that, but it is, so we have to all kind of follow those rules until they start changing. But it's getting about -3.5, 3.6 is overall loudness. That's short term. Obviously when there's other things added, like the leads and the other basses and melodies, then it will bring up the level up. But the main three elements, obviously drums, bass and sub. So yeah, that's a good way of getting your track to sound nice and loud, and getting the maximum out of everything without it sounding too overboard and completely squashed into something unrecognizable.